Hello. In this talk, I would like to provide an overview over work we did in the recent years between EPFL and ICRC on applying data science to support humanitarian action. So it is quite obvious that public data like social media, news, and web potentially contains a lot of valuable information to support humanitarian action. It could be used to understand better public perception, or it could also be helpful in identifying risks and opportunities, just to cite two possible examples. So this is what has been the concern of our joint work with ICRC and the Distributed Information Systems Laboratory at EPFL. We are working now over several years to see what kind of relevant insights we can obtain from this public data, and doing so by using big data and artificial intelligence techniques. So the three cases I wanted to present you was about foreign fighters and what is the public perception of their return. Then the use of image analytics, specifically in the search of missing people, and finally, reputation monitoring for ICRC. So as you maybe know, there was a major public discussion starting on returning foreign fighters and their families in Europe. So this was triggered mainly by the closure of the Al-Hol camp in Syria in December 28, and it was broadly discussed both in the press and in social media. So we have been identifying this question with ICRC and wanted to better understand what are the narratives of this public discussion. So obviously one question is whether there is online hate speech going on and whether it is targeting the fighters, but probably also their families. Also, what are the narratives? Is it about humanitarian, legal, security, or economic aspects? And finally, are there leading voices for each of those narratives? So we approached the problem by first collecting data from public sources, particularly social media and their Twitter. So from different European countries, just to cite an example, we got about 250,000 tweets in French. Then we started to do vocabulary analysis, and this was used to identify and code the most important narratives. And this we did with a social science group in collaboration with the University of Lausanne. And then finally, the idea is to apply machine learning once we have coded the data, that we can also generalize the analysis to new content automatically. So the tool that we used has been a platform that we have developed over the years at LSAR, and that is made available now also as a commercial solution through a startup of LSAR, which is Linkalong. So what were the findings that we got? First one is, contrary to many beliefs about social media, most of the social media discussion is still largely driven by articles that come from mainstream media. So whenever we are investigating a major peak that is occurring, then we can associate it very easily with an event that has been reported through traditional media, typically. Second main insight is that a very negative viewpoint towards our foreign fighters is largely dominating the whole discussion. But on the other hand, that came a little bit as of a surprise that explicit hate speech is rather sparse. Maybe this is also partly due to censorship from the platforms. And finally, the discussion is largely driven by right-wing influences, alternative media movements, and also trolls. An interesting question was also, what is the role of humanitarian organizations in this? And they are largely absent, both as an information source, but also being mentioned in this type of discussion. This was a typical study. We did many studies of this kind over the years together with ICRC. The second project I wanted to cite is image analysis. So this started out of the idea to support the search for missing people in conflict zones and apply image analysis to this problem, but then generalized also to apply image analysis for more contexts. So what are the challenges? First of all, of course, finding the relevant information. Where do we get images from? Then also supporting multimodal search, because there is not only image content, there's text content, and we have to combine these different modalities. One big challenge is that in general, the data that we are using is very poor quality, and that we have to finally also to address a lot of data protection questions, since this is a sensitive topic. So we have been working on applying face retrieval to this context, which required certain adaptations, for example, dealing with poor quality images. So we developed suitable tools to that. And we are currently working on applying this to internal ICRC data. And this requires in particular also deploying in a secured environment in order to satisfy data protection requirements. But we also went further. We wanted also to use images to identify other types of content. So you would like probably to find images that can identify damaged buildings or humanitarians in action or troops moving. And so there do not exist any standard classifiers to do that. So we have the need to very quickly define new image classifiers. And we developed a tool that uses active labeling. So basically interacts with a domain expert to develop in very short time this new type of classifiers that we are needing. Finally, a quick word on reputation monitoring. Since we are reading the press and also social media, ICRC is of course also interested to understand of how is it mentioned in those. To that end, we developed several solutions. So one is to generate automatically a daily digest of the most important mentions of ICRC, both in press and in social media. And for those who want to go deeper, we have a platform for analyzing all this data in depth to understand trends and the context in which these mentions are occurring. By doing so, we identified a specific problem, and that is detecting attacks on ICRC reputation. At the first glance, it seems to be a simple problem because essentially you want to identify mentions of ICRC and then test for negative sentiment that we can do with standard machine learning classifiers. But then looking more closely, this problem is not so easy because ICRC is habitually mentioned in conflict situations. So in a sense, even if ICRC is playing a positive role, the context is negative and the message would be classified as negative. As you see, for example, in this example, on ceasefire and disappearance, and then ICRC in a helping role. But there are a few cases where actually attacks on ICRC are taken in social media, and this is the ones that you would like to filter out. And this is a hard problem. So we have started a new project now that uses recent natural language processing technology that can understand better context in natural language to better identify this critical content. And this is funded by the Science and Technology for Humanitarian Action Challenge of EPFL and ICRC. So to conclude, there are numerous opportunities to support humanitarian action using data science, but it's very important to identify the meaningful use cases, what is the need, what are the useful data sources, and what is the technical feasibility. And to do that, close collaboration both between the technological experts and the domain experts is essential. And finally, involving a startup or creating a startup out of these activities was also essential to go the critical step from research to find also operational implementations that last. So if you're interested in any of this, both from the research perspective, but also from potentially take advantage of existing solutions, feel free to contact me. Thank you for your attention.